October 12, 1943, 23,000 feet over the Rhineland, B-17 Flying Fortress, serial number 42-3067, suddenly shook violently. A 20-millimeter cannon round had ripped through its number 3 engine. Thick black smoke billowed from the engine cowling, and Lieutenant Robert Hayes could feel the control stick trembling in his hands. The bomber's nose dropped 15 degrees in an instant. In the radio compartment behind him, Donnelly watched hydraulic oil spray across the interior like blood from an artery. This bomber was dying, and they were still 140 miles from England. High above and to the right, Lieutenant James Howell witnessed it all. He banked his P-47 Thunderbolt sharply and locked onto the crippled bomber. The 24-year-old Howell was from a farm in New Jersey. Over Europe, he had logged 312 combat hours and flown 72 missions. He knew exactly what happened to stragglers. The bomber formation ahead continued on without hesitation. That was standard procedure. A damaged aircraft could not drag the entire group down. Hayes understood. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Frank Morrison, was already running the numbers. 3 engines remaining, maximum airspeed around 160 knots, altitude bleeding off at 200 feet per minute, and German fighters circling like sharks. Howell keyed his radio. "Big brother, this is Jersey 27. I've got you visual. Stick close to me." Hayes's voice came back tight and controlled. "Jersey, we've lost hydraulics. Number 3 engine is on fire. Can't hold altitude." "Copy, big brother. I'm not going anywhere." It was a promise he had no authority to make. His fuel gauge showed only 58 minutes remaining, depending on throttle setting. The bomber was struggling along at 140 knots, still 90 miles northwest of England. The math did not favor anyone. 6 hours earlier, the mission had launched from Thorpe Abbott's airfield, home of the 100th Bomb Group. Hayes and his crew were flying their 19th mission, a daylight precision strike against the ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. Intelligence had promised light resistance. They could not have been more wrong. That morning, 320 B-17s crossed the English Channel. The Luftwaffe responded with more than 400 fighters, Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s, scrambling from over a dozen airfields. The sky quickly became a slaughterhouse. Bombers fell in flames, wreckage and crews spinning toward the ground. The escorting P-47s fought desperately, but limited range forced them to turn back at the German border, their fuel nearly gone. Hayes's bomber took its first hit during the bomb run. Flak exploded below, shrapnel tearing through the thin aluminum skin. Sergeant Eddie Martinez, the ball turret gunner, was struck in the left shoulder. Corporal Tommy Briggs, the waist gunner, was knocked unconscious by a metal fragment that dented his helmet. Seconds later, 4 FW-190s dove from high at 11 o'clock, cannons blazing. Sergeant Paul Richter, the top turret gunner, opened up with his .50 caliber guns, tracers stitching a deadly arc. 1 FW-190 exploded in midair, breaking into tumbling wreckage. But the other 3 kept attacking. That was when number 3 engine died completely. 15 minutes after leaving the target area, Hayes fought to keep the plane steady. Altitude had fallen to 22,000 feet. Morrison frantically tried to restart the damaged engine, but the propeller only spun uselessly. Worse, the hydraulic system was dead. Turrets wouldn't move. The bomb bay doors hung open, creating massive drag. "We should have everyone bail out," Morrison said quietly. Hayes didn't answer immediately. Below them was occupied France. The fields belonged to Germany. Anyone who parachuted out, if they survived, would become a prisoner. The French resistance sometimes helped downed pilots escape, but chances were slim. And Martinez was wounded. Could he even jump with a torn shoulder? "Give it a minute," Hayes said. Above them, Howell scanned the sky. His 8.50 caliber guns were loaded with 3,400 rounds, enough for roughly 34 seconds of firing. He had already burned 600 rounds in earlier fighting, leaving only 28 seconds of fire. Then movement at 2 o'clock. 3 splinter-camouflaged Bf-109s closing in from the south. They had spotted the helpless target. Howell pushed the throttle forward and banked hard, placing himself directly between the bomber and the enemy. The P-47's Pratt & Whitney R2800 roared to life, 2,000 horsepower driving the speed past 300 knots. The German pilot saw him too late. Howell aimed and squeezed the trigger. All 8 guns fired at once. The recoil slowed the fighter. Brass casings fell away, tracers slamming into the Bf-109. The canopy shattered. Metal flew from the cowling. White glycol coolant sprayed out, and the German fighter rolled over and plunged. The other 2 Bf-109s climbed away in panic. They had expected an easy kill. They had run into a fighter pilot. "Jersey, thanks for the save, but you're burning fuel. You ought to head home," Hayes said. "Negative, big brother. I'm escorting you to the border." The border was fighter pilot slang for the English Channel. They were still 90 miles short. At the bomber's 140-knot ground speed, it would take 38 minutes. Howell had only 42 minutes of fuel left. Time was already critical. The bomber continued to lose altitude. 20,000, 19,000 feet. Even with Hayes's best effort, 3 engines couldn't keep the damaged plane aloft. The open bomb bay, the dead engine, it was flying like a brick. At 18,000 feet, they flew through a thin layer of clouds, flying on instruments for 30 seconds. When they broke clear, Howell saw a new threat. 5 Bf-109s in a perfect V formation, approaching head-on. The Germans had called reinforcements. This was a coordinated attack. Howell turned directly into them. It took nerves of steel. Closing speed exceeded 500 knots. The German pilots hesitated. 5 against 1 should have been easy, but this pilot had already shot down one of their men and damaged another. At 3,000 yards, Howell opened fire first. The long shot didn't score a hit, but it broke their formation and bought the bomber precious time. In the dogfight that followed, Howell turned the P-47's ruggedness into an advantage. He pulled high G turns, his vision blurring from the force, and locked onto a Bf-109 at 600 yards. 20mm shells and .50 caliber rounds tore the wing off. The fuselage rolled into the clouds. The remaining Germans finally turned away. Losing 3 aircraft in 5 minutes was too high a price. "Jersey 27, you just saved all our lives," Hayes said, relieved. Howell didn't reply right away. His fuel was down to 28 minutes. The bomber was at 16,000 feet, still 65 miles from the channel. "We're not going to make England, are we?" Morrison asked. Hayes stared at the instruments. Altitude, airspeed, fuel remaining, oil pressure on 3 engines. All told the same story. "We'll make the channel," he said. The unspoken second half. After that, they would ditch in the icy water and pray an RAF rescue launch found them before hypothermia set in. In the North Sea in October, a man could survive only about 20 minutes. Howell was calculating too. Only 23 minutes of fuel left. The bomber was 58 miles from the English coast. At their current speed, 24 minutes, he would run out of fuel 1 minute before the bomber reached safety. He made his decision. Throttle back to minimum cruise, lean the fuel mixture to maximum economy, adjust propeller pitch for efficiency, every trick to stretch his fuel just 2 more minutes. The bomber kept sinking, 15,000, 13,000 feet. The fire in number 3 engine was out, but the windmilling propeller and broken cowling still created massive drag. Hydraulics were nearly useless. Every control response was sluggish. Howell stayed above and behind the bomber, flying S-turns, his eyes constantly sweeping the sky and checking his fuel. German pilots across northern France likely knew about this crippled plane. Danger could come at any second. At 12,000 feet, they broke through another layer of clouds. Morrison spotted them first. Bandits at 10 o'clock high, six BF-109s in a flawless attack formation, diving from 17,000 feet. The Germans had organized a hunter pack. This was no probe. They were here to finish the job. Howell saw them at the same time. Ammunition was down to roughly 20 seconds of firing. Every burst had to count. He slammed the throttle forward and climbed to intercept, ignoring fuel. The P-47's engines screamed. Howell opened fire at 1,200 yards, missing but shattering their attack. Two banked left, two right, two kept coming. Howell locked onto the rightmost BF-109, closed to 400 yards, and fired. All 8 guns roared. The enemy tail disintegrated. The plane pitched up, stalled, and spun down. But the other 5 were attacking from multiple angles. Howell couldn't cover them all. 2 BB-109s dove from 7 o'clock high, cannons firing. Sergeant Kendrick, the tail gunner, had finally fixed his jammed guns. He opened up with twin .50s, ripping into the lead fighter. Smoke poured from its engine. The BF-109 pulled up and away, but the second one kept firing. 20-millimeter rounds tore into the bomber's left wing, piercing the aluminum. One shell exploded inside the number 2 fuel tank. Vapor ignited. The wing burst into flames. "Number 2 engine fire," Morrison yelled, hitting the fire suppression switch. CO2 flooded the engine bay. The flames died, but the damage was done. Number 2 engine was dead, propeller locked. The 4-engine bomber now flew on just 2. Altitude fell below 11,000 feet. The plane began to bank left, unbalanced by the dead engines. "We have to bail, Skipper," Morrison insisted. Hayes shook his head. "Not yet. Jersey's still with us." Howell was now locked in a brutal dogfight at 10,000 feet. The P-47's rugged airframe saved him twice. Shells hit the fuselage but failed to penetrate the armor behind the cockpit. One round tore into the left wing, 18 inches from the fuel tank. He shot down another BF-109 with a nearly impossible deflection shot. The German pilot never saw it coming. His plane exploded in an orange fireball. The last 3 Germans finally fled. To destroy one bomber, they had lost 3 fighters. Their fuel was low. The fight wasn't worth it. When Howell caught back up to the bomber, it was at 9,000 feet. His fuel showed only 11 minutes left. The English Channel was 42 miles ahead. At the bomber's current speed, 18 minutes. He was 7 minutes short. "Big brother, I'm gonna have to leave you soon. Fuel's critical," Howell said. After a short silence, Hayes replied, "Copy that, Jersey. You've done more than anyone could ask. Head home." "Negative. I'm staying with you as long as I can." In the cockpit, Morrison leaned toward Hayes. "He's gonna crash trying to save us." Hayes knew it was true. If the P-47 pilot stayed with them all the way to the channel, he would run out of fuel over enemy territory, bail out or ditch, and end up a prisoner. The bomber kept falling, 8,000 feet, sinking at 300 feet per minute. At that rate, they would hit wave-top height before reaching safety. 7,000 feet. The French coastline appeared on the horizon. Beyond it, 35 miles of cold gray water. Beyond that, England. Home. Howell's fuel was now in the red. Only 8 minutes left. They flew over a French coastal town. German flak batteries opened up. Black puffs exploded around the bomber. Hayes jinked left and right. A shell burst close by. Shrapnel ripped into the waist. Briggs, the waist gunner, had woken up. He felt warm liquid running down his leg. A fragment had cut his thigh. Not serious, but agonizing. "Waist gunner hit," someone shouted over the intercom. "How bad?" Hayes asked. "Not bad, Skipper. I can move." At 6,000 feet, the bomber crossed the coastline and was over the channel. The water below was black and cold, rough with whitecaps. The temperature was around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Survival time, 20 minutes. Howell checked his fuel one last time. Only 5 minutes left. The English coast was still 28 miles away. He would run dry 12 miles short. "Big brother, I'm gonna ditch. I'll put it down near you. If we go in the same area, we've got a better chance of being picked up," Howell said. Hayes understood immediately. This P-47 pilot wasn't heading back to France, where he might survive capture. He was choosing to ditch in the channel with them. He was willing to die to stay with them to the end. "Jersey, don't do this. You can still make France. You'll live even if you're captured." "No, I'm not leaving you, big brother. We either go home together or we stay here together." That radio transmission reignited hope in the 10 bomber crewmen who had already accepted death. Someone was choosing to stand with them. They were not alone. At 5,000 feet, Howell matched the bomber's descent. Fuel showed 3 minutes. The engine could quit at any second. If it died, he had roughly 90 seconds of glide before hitting the water. At 4,000 feet, Hayes scanned the horizon desperately. No rescue boats, no ships, only open ocean. At 3,000 feet, Howell's engine sputtered, the first sign of fuel starvation. He switched tanks, trying to squeeze every last drop from the lines. Just 30 more seconds. At 2,000 feet, Hayes began the ditching checklist. Morrison recited the steps with professional calm. "All crew, prepare for water ditching. Assume brace position. Impact in 90 seconds. Kendrick in the tail strapped himself tight. Donnelly in the radio compartment braced against the wall. Briggs and the other gunners huddled between equipment racks. Martinez in the ball turret had rotated at level, trying to climb out. The ball turret was a death trap in a water landing. At 1,000 feet, Howell's engine sputtered again, longer this time. The propeller windmilled for 2 seconds, then caught again. Hayes turned the bomber into the wind, trying to slow the impact speed as much as possible. The bomber fell through 800, 700, 600 feet, and then Howell's engine died completely. The thunder of the Pratt & Whitney R2800, constant for 3 hours, fell silent. The propeller spun, but no power remained. The 8-ton P-47 became a glider with terrible glide characteristics. Howell immediately nosed down to maintain airspeed. Too slow, and he would stall and flip. Too fast, and the wings would break on impact. At 400 feet, Hayes pulled back on the yoke, lifting the nose. Airspeed dropped, 120, 110, 100 knots. When the bomber hit the water, disaster struck. The fuselage slammed into the waves, bending like a living thing. Rivets popped, seams split. Water erupted upward. The bomber skipped twice, then settled, skidding through the spray. Inside, crewmen were thrown against their restraints. Equipment tore loose like shrapnel. Lieutenant Carl Vickers, the bombardier, slammed into the instrument panel, dislocating his shoulder. Martinez, still trying to escape the ball turret, was trapped when the turret collapsed on impact. He was killed instantly. The bomber skidded 300 yards and stopped. Water poured in through dozens of cracks and holes. "Everybody out now!" Hayes shouted. The crew rushed for the exits. Top hatch, waist windows, nose hatch. Morrison kicked open the escape hatch above his seat and pulled Hayes outside. "Come on, skipper!" Both men fell onto the wing. The bomber was already listing and sinking. The damaged left side flooded rapidly. It had barely 2 minutes of buoyancy left. 200 yards away, Howell was fighting for his life. The P-47 hit the water nose first at 90 knots. Its 2,000-pound engine acted like an anchor, dragging the plane downward. The fighter flipped over. Howell was thrown against the instrument panel, his head slamming into the gun sight. Blood blurred his vision. Water flooded the cockpit, ice cold. He choked and fumbled for the canopy release, his hands numb. He pulled the emergency release. The canopy blew off. Water rushed in. Howell fought upward, kicking free of his gear and parachute. The plane was sinking fast, pulling him toward the bottom. Just before the tail vanished, he broke free. He surfaced, gasping for air. 400 yards away, men were jumping off the bomber's wing. An orange life raft had inflated. At least some emergency equipment had worked. Howell inflated his Mae West and swam toward the bomber. The cold water drained his strength. His flight boots felt like lead. When he reached the nearest raft, several hands pulled him aboard. Hayes's face appeared above him, voice filled with disbelief. "Jersey, you crazy son of a bitch! You actually did it!" Howell couldn't speak. He was shivering violently from the cold. Someone wrapped a blanket around him. The crew counted heads. 8 on one raft, 3 on the other. 11 men total, 10 bomber crewmen plus 1 fighter pilot. Everyone had survived the ditching. "Wait, where's Martinez?" Hayes asked suddenly. Silence fell. Donnelly spoke softly. "He didn't make it, trapped in the ball turret." Hayes closed his eyes. 9 rescued, 1 killed. That was the cruel arithmetic of war. They floated in the icy channel for 18 minutes, each second feeling like an hour. Some prayed silently, some cried, some just stared at the gray sky. When an RAF rescue launch finally appeared and pulled alongside, Hayes insisted Howell get on board first. "This man," Hayes told the British crew, "flew 90 miles with us, fought off 20 enemy fighters, ran out of fuel, and ditched with us anyway. Today he saved 9 lives." The British captain looked at the soaked, shivering young American and nodded firmly. "Well done, Yank. Very well done." 3 days later, Howell was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. The citation read, "Extraordinary heroism in action against the enemy." Hayes and his crew attended the ceremony. As the medal was pinned to his chest, they stood at attention, eyes filled with respect. Years after the war, when someone asked Hayes about that day, he said, "We were dead men walking. We knew it. Everybody knew it. But that pilot in the P-47, he decided we were going to live. He could have left. He chose to stay. He had no chance. He chose to fight for us anyway. He could have gone home. He chose to ditch in the ocean with us. That wasn't just courage. It was something beyond courage. I don't have the words for it." James Howell returned to civilian life and rarely spoke of his combat experiences. When people asked about his medal, he changed the subject. But the crew of that B-17 never forgot. Every Christmas until his death in 1998, he received cards from the men he had saved and from their families. 9 lives, 90 miles, 1 decision. That is what defines a warrior. The men who flew these missions understood a kind of sacrifice most of us will never know. They flew into fire because someone had to. They could have run. They chose to stay. Because brothers never leave brothers behind. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel in their honor. Share it with your family and friends. Let these heroes never be forgotten.